He killed 40 million people and accidentally cooled the entire planet. We tend to think climate change is a modern problem, something born from smokestacks and tailpipes. But 800 years ago, one man may have pulled off the opposite, and he did it through the deadliest military career in human history. Chapter 1. One Man, One Empire. In 1206, a Mongolian warlord named Temujin finished uniting the warring tribes of the steppe and took a new name, Genghis Khan, universal ruler. Within decades, his armies had torn through Asia, the Middle East, and into Europe, building the largest connected land empire the world had ever seen, eventually covering roughly a fifth of the planet's surface. The conquests were not just large, they were brutal, almost beyond comprehension. Cities that refused to surrender were wiped from the map. Whole populations were executed. By most historical estimates, the Mongol conquests killed somewhere close to 40 million people, a toll that, relative to the world's population at the time, may have exceeded the combined death tolls of both world wars. Chapter 2. When the farmers disappear. Conquest on this scale doesn't just kill people, it empties land. Across Persia, China, and Central Asia, region after region lost huge portions of its population almost overnight. Irrigation networks fell apart, with no one left to maintain them. Farms that had fed cities for generations went untended. An untended farmland doesn't stay farmland. Left alone, it grows wild. First grass, then brush, then trees. Decade after decade, millions of acres of cropland across the conquered territories slowly turned back into forest. At the time, this would have looked like nothing more than abandoned land reverting to wilderness. No one had any concept of carbon dioxide or atmospheric chemistry, but something was happening that scientists wouldn't notice for another 800 years. Chapter 3. A 21st Century Discovery. In 2011, climate scientist Julia Pongratz and her colleagues at the Carnegie Institution's Department of Global Ecology built a model tracing global land use all the way back to the year 800 AD. Their goal was to test whether history's worst catastrophes, the Black Death, the collapse of the Ming Dynasty, the European conquest of the Americas, and the Mongol invasions, had left any mark on Earth's carbon cycle. 3 of the 4 events turned out to be minor blips. The 4th was different. The team calculated that forest regrowth following the Mongol invasions pulled around 700 million tons of carbon out of the atmosphere, about the same amount of carbon the entire modern world emits from gasoline in a single year. Of the 4 catastrophes studied, the Mongol invasion was the only one large enough to outweigh carbon emissions happening everywhere else on Earth at the same time, leading the researchers to conclude it likely caused a temporary stall in global CO2 growth. Chapter 4. A body count with a footprint. Stop and consider what that actually means. A military campaign fought with horses and arrows, carried out by a population that was a tiny sliver of today's, left an atmospheric mark equivalent to taking every car on Earth off the road for a year. There's even physical evidence in the ice. Antarctic ice cores show atmospheric carbon dioxide dipping by roughly 3 parts per million somewhere between 1200 and 1470 CE, a stretch of time that overlaps with both the Mongol conquests and, later, the Black Death. It's one of the only times in history a single human being's actions may have nudged the planet's thermostat. Chapter 5. The Catch. Here's where the story gets messier, because the scientists who made the discovery were also the first to question it. Pongratz's own team admitted that Genghis Khan's effect on the climate was probably too small to be cleanly detected in ice cores on its own, and that bigger natural forces, like volcanic activity, were likely behind the larger swings in carbon during that period. Other scientists have argued the team actually underestimated the effect, since some of their assumptions about decomposing vegetation were conservative. Historians have raised a different objection entirely. The Mongol invasions and the Black Death overlap by decades in most timelines, making it nearly impossible to credit one catastrophe over the other for any climate effect. They also note that other massive population collapses in history, like China's An Lushan Rebellion, show no detectable cooling at all, which weakens the case that depopulation alone explains what happened. So the honest version of this story isn't Genghis Khan definitely cooled the Earth. It's depopulation on a massive scale can measurably affect atmospheric carbon, and the Mongol conquests are the best documented case we have, even if the exact size of the effect is still debated.
Chapter 6. What it actually tells us.
Strip away the viral headline, and what's left is a genuinely strange fact about how the world works. Kill enough people, abandon enough farmland, and forests will quietly start undoing some of what agriculture had done to the atmosphere. It's not a feel-good story. Genghis Khan wasn't an environmentalist by any stretch. He was a conqueror whose empire was built on mass death. Any cooling effect was an unintended side effect of catastrophe, not an achievement. But it's a useful, uncomfortable reminder. Human beings have been altering the atmosphere for far longer than we usually admit. Long before coal, long before oil. We just used to do it by accident.